Hello there. I think I'll try to finish reading through the seventh part of the Private Eye series of articles by Dr Philip Hammond, and I'll get straight onto it so I can just finish it and perhaps make some comments along the way. So the section we'd got to is the substandard care argument. By far the most common cause of avoidable death on maternity and neonatal units across the NHS is substandard care. As with many other units, the Countess of Chester Hospital had all the ingredients for this, as outlined by a report from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, RCPCH for short, which found, quote, significant gaps in medical and nursing rotas, with lack of compliance with standards in respect of staffing, insufficient consultant presence to safely cover the paediatric wards, including the neonatal unit, and insufficient junior and training doctors available, with too much cover from locums. I'll interject as I go through, or I just remember there was that case of a particular locum that a number of the nurses had reported to the nursing management and to the hospital generally. There was a particular locum that they didn't want back, obviously because they didn't feel any confidence in him. I think it was a him. I'm not sure we know who that person is and when they were around. That seems to have been forgotten. I'm not sure. I'm not saying it's been forgotten, but it hasn't been brought up lately. This locum that there was these internal memos going around saying this locum mustn't come back to the neonatal ward. I think it was a male locum doctor. But who it was, when they were there, what interactions he had with particular babies at what times, and indeed the ones that end up forming part of the indictment against Lucy, I'm not sure that anyone's been able to track that down or to in any detail at all to see how that might mesh together, how it might merge together in terms of his presence and things going wrong in terms of procedures, for example, intubation and fitting catheters and all sorts of things like that. Was he... Anyway, we just don't know. We don't know his name. We don't know when exactly he was there, but we know that there was a particular one that the nurses specifically requested would not be brought back onto the neonatal unit at all costs. Leadership was seen as remote from the unit with no specific children's champion on the board. That was the end of the quote from the RCPCH. So far, so NHS. Oh, that's what Philip Hammond's saying. That's what he's sort of saying that's par for the course, isn't he? So far, so NHS. The possibility that substandard care could account for some of the deaths was crystallised when the managers invited a senior neonatologist, Jane Horden, and this is something that was covered in the Telegraph article that came out yesterday, Jane Horden to undertake an advisory medical report in October 2016. So that's a month after Lucy Letby has filed her grievance and 3 months after Lucy Letby's been removed from the unit. So in October 2016, after the RCPCH visit. Right, so I think they, from memory now, I forgot so many dates. I think they visit in August. The RCPCH visits in August. I'm pretty sure about that. And then they write up their report, and eventually it's published in February 2017. But it's got the date December 2016 that it's completed, but it doesn't get returned to the hospital in a published state until the following February. I hope I got that right from memory. So back to Jane Horden. Her report on 17 babies found a number of deaths that could have been prevented with different care, i.e. better care, obviously, and identified major or significant suboptimal clinical care. In 14 of the 17 cases, major significant suboptimal care in 14 of 17 cases. Presumably, this figure of 17, so that's A to Q, so, are these identical? Are those 17 cases identical to the 17 cases that end up being on the indictment? And then you've got to look at incidents vis-a-vis versus cases. Is a case, this is something that Dr. McConville said earlier on when he was talking to Peter Elster. What is a case? Is a case an individual baby? Or is it an incident about an individual baby? So could there be, how are those 17 cases split? Could there be multiple cases for the same individual? I'm assuming it's all about what people are meaning when they're using these terms, cases. It's a bit of a movable, fluctuating meaning potentially here. She said, that's Dr. Horden said, further forensic investigation was needed to identify the cause of 4 deaths. Yeah, so this is what's been happening at Thirlwall today. I haven't heard anything about it because I haven't looked on Twitter. I can't face it today, but both Dr. Jane Horden and Dr. McPartland, who's coming up here in this article, are testifying, giving evidence to the Thirlwall inquiry today. So she said further forensic investigation was needed, that's Dr. Horden saying that, which was done by experienced Alder-Hey pathologist, Dr. Joe McPartland. She could not deduce murder either. So you've got, as we keep saying, you've got in terms of 6 of the 7 deaths that end up being murder charges, you've got the post-mortems, then you've got Dr. Horden looking at them, then you've got Dr. McPartland looking at a smaller number of them, so that's 3 sets of professionals, and they're a lot closer in time. And all those 3 sets of professionals, those 3 individuals are just, everything that they've decided is simply overturned within minutes by, according to him, the man himself, Dewey Evans. He said within 10 minutes he realised this was a deliberate harm. But none of the actual pathologists, the actual pathologists who actually did the post-mortems, physically did them, couldn't do it. Dr. Horden couldn't do it. Dr. McPartland couldn't do it. An experienced pathologist. And Dewey Evans, we're meant to believe, this is the thing that people keep saying, not a neonatologist and certainly not a pathologist, just working from notes that he himself said were in a parlous, shabby state, upside down, out of order, sent first from the hospital to the police, one can only assume in physical form, photocopies of the originals. I must assume. I think we're assuming that. Because in the I was going to say Bumblebee, but it's the Hummingbird video, one of the officers mimes, when we got all the notes couriered over from the hospital, it was like somebody had taken files and thrown them up in the air, and she did the gesture. So that obviously tells us that it was physical notes that the police received. Then we hear very, very clearly from Evans that he received the notes electronically. So what must have happened, I can only assume, or we can only assume, is that the police then scanned all those physical notes in, and they admitted themselves they didn't know what they were looking at. So that's when Evans gets them, and he says they're in a shabby state, but he doesn't blame the police for that. He blames the hospital and says they're in a terrible state. So it's on the basis of these shabby sets of notes that he overturns the post-mortems, overturns what Dr. Horden says, overturns Dr. Joe McPartland. But that's what a genius does, isn't it? That's how much of a genius the guy is. But of course, there are little problems that go wrong, like he got the method of murder wrong, so he's allowed to, apparently with nobody particularly being bothered by it in the justice system, he's allowed to just change his mind after the convictions, after the jury found guilt based on his evidence and the evidence of other experts in the 2023 trial. He's allowed to change the method of murder down the line, a year down the line, for several cases. And that's meant to fly, and it does seem to fly with the so-called justice system. They don't seem to be bothered by it. Anyway, I'm going off in too much detail, I'm sorry. The report was pivotal to Lucy Letby's defence. That's the report by Dr. McPartland, and obviously, as a supplementary report, and Dr. Jane Horden. As it demonstrated, the report, the likelihood of suboptimal care as a cause for the collapses and failed resuscitations of at least some of the babies from a neonatal source far more senior than the prosecution's. Well, yes, far more senior, and it was an actual neonatal source. The point really to drive home there is that he isn't a neonatal source. Evans isn't. He's a paediatrician, a retired paediatrician. He's quoted as saying, babies are very simple things. So that's the person we're comparing it to, all these actual experts and pathologists, comparing it to somebody who says, they're just very simple things. And he's got a very checkered history, as we know. So it's more than just that they're a senior neonatal source. It's that they are a neonatal source, and he is not. He is not. Bowen is second fiddle, as it were, is meant to be a neonatologist, but then she's just there to rubber stamp him. He's the one that drives it. She's just there to rubber stamp him. It's her first turn, her first go. Bowen now, Sandy Bowen, from Guernsey. It's her first go at acting as an expert. Hopefully it's her very last as well, first and last. And she's not going to queer her pitch. And it was set up by the police so that it's just a shoe-in, it's a rubber stamping operation, and that's exactly what she delivered. She delivered that. So where was I here? So yeah, they are an actual neonatal source, whereas the prosecution, not so much. So why does Horden not get a single mention in the entire court transcript? Well, absolutely. Why not? But was that not also incumbent on the defence to mention her, and more than mention her, to go into detail about her report? And to, what about this? Call her as a witness. What about that? Could they not have done that? Was she warned off, Dr. Horden, because she's working for the NHS, in the same way that the nurses we've heard that they were warned off for wanting to give character statements for Lucy Letby, saying, well, you better not do it. Warned off, coerced, which I think is a very clear case of the NHS interfering in the proper progress of justice. Can't remember the exact legal term, there's undermining the progress. There's that other term, I've forgotten what it is now. Yeah, so why didn't she get a mention? Was that report given to the defence then, at all. Alas, it was excluded from the evidence because Lucy Letby was only charged on 9 of the 17 troubling cases Horden identified, so it was deemed irrelevant. Oh my God. Oh my God. So who excluded it? The judge? Was it the prosecution objected to it, and the judge says, no, you can't have it then? And why should that matter? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you exclude it on that basis? Because it includes them. It doesn't matter whether there were other ones. Why would it matter that they were other ones? If Lucy Letby's been charged with 9 of the 17 troubling cases, there's some fascinating stuff there. She's been charged with 9 of the 17 troubling cases that Horden identified, so it's deemed irrelevant. It's insane, isn't it? It's wicked, it's sick. Is that the judge decision? Prosecution objects, and the judge says, well, no, you can't do it because it's irrelevant because it's only 9 of them. How is that possibly irrelevant? It's relevant 9 times. It's relevant for 9 charges. It's as relevant for every one of those charges as much as any other one. It's relevant 9 times in a row. The more you hear, the more sickening it is. It says here, in fact, that makes it highly relevant. Sir Dr. Philip Hammond says, because it shows babies deteriorated unexpectedly in the absence of Lucy Letby. Yes, for that point as well, absolutely. Absolutely. With substandard care as a likely causal factor. And of course, we mustn't lose sight of the... I'm just going to get my note here. I'd forgotten a term. We mustn't lose sight of the Pseudomonas aeruginosa that was there, that we know from at least, people are saying February 2015 now, but I had heard before it was May 2015. Again, it's very hard to pin down dates when things were found. And would you trust them anyway? Would you trust that hospital trust to tell you the truth anyway? I personally wouldn't trust them in any regard at all. So we mustn't lose that. It's not just about the substandard care. It's substandard care plus pathogens, plus a spate of infections that get wildly out of control. And they can't get rid of this Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and it's still there in December 2015, and it's still there into the next year, into 2016. And you've got this 3 deaths in just in January 2016 alone. 3 deaths in 1 month. None of those deaths were attributed to Lucy Letby. Going back to, there's more to dig out of this. If she was asked to look into 17 babies, in terms of who asked her that specifically? Was it Breary and Jairam? Who was it? And if they chose those particular cases, those 17, and only 9 of them crossed over with the indictment, what of the other 8 cases then? Were they trying to get Lucy Letby for those, but they just couldn't work up a charge? Were those other 8 charges part of Dewey Evans's alleged 25 further cases that he finds that the police don't take any further? Which he either finds in 2018, according to the New Yorker, or according to Philip Hammond in a previous article, that he finds them in 2023? Or are there 2 sets of a further 25 cases, making a total of 50 cases on top of the cases that end up on the indictment? There's so much lack of clarity, or definitive clarity, about what's happened. There's so much in shadow. So there's the absurdity, or the wicked, evil absurdity of saying that that report is not relevant, and it's excluded from evidence. It's sick. It's sick to. It's just sick. But it leaves 8 cases. Okay, so Dr. Philip Hammond's saying, yes, it shows babies deteriorated in the absence of Lucy Letby. Does he know that? Does Philip Hammond know that? Dr. Philip Hammond know that Lucy Letby is not on duty, or is it just simply she wasn't charged with them? I don't know what assumptions are being made here, because we need to have we need to know what the cases were, when it happened, what is a case again, and we need to match them up with the rotas for the full 2 years. Otherwise, there's kind of guesswork going on here in some of these assertions that Dr. Philip Hammond's making, because he says, in fact, that makes it highly relevant. It shows babies deteriorated, unexpected, in the absence of Lucy Letby. Is that an assumption he's making purely because she wasn't charged with those cases? We're hearing from other sources that, it's claimed by the BBC journalist and Panorama that Lucy Letby, originally they claimed that Lucy Letby was on duty for 13 deaths between June 2015-2016. Then they revised it down to 12. I think they've got that figure wrong as well. So we're kind of splashing about here in undefined figures and unresolved issues in terms of stats and figures and who was where for what. It's not explicit. People are saying different things. I'm not blaming anyone. It's just that it's hard to get to the truth when you're dealing with people that are trying to keep the truth from you, or to just hide it, or just to obscure it. If you get an FOI from a hospital in which a baby is said to have been murdered in August, and then in October 2015, and they send you an FOI, and there's no deaths in those months, you've got to wonder what's going on, haven't you? With the hospital, with the reporting. What can you rely on? Can you rely on anything here? But I'm wondering if it's just an assumption that Dr. Philip, he might be correct. It might be that those 8 remaining cases that don't cross over with the indictment from the 17 of this Horden report, Lucy Letby wasn't on duty for. Or it might be she was on duty for them, but they didn't charge her with them. We just don't know, but there are certain assumptions being made. It says here, it also highlights what a statistical miracle it was that when prosecution expert Dr. Evans screened the notes blind. Yeah, right. Yeah, he did. Yeah, right. Sorry, no, please. That when prosecution expert Dr. Evans screened the notes blind, all his suspicious cases turned out to involve Lucy Letby, but when Horden did it, eyes open, 8 of them didn't. Why not? God, there's a lot in that to unpack. I have to think about that. I try to do my thinking on the hoof because it seems to work a bit, hopefully. But it's... he didn't do anything blind. We know that Breary handed over a 22-page document to the police. I think it's bloody obvious that they shared that with Evans. What we'll never know, because they'll never tell us, because it's all about collusion, is how much effectively they were all in the same room. They don't have to be physically in the same room, it can all be done by email. They're all getting on the same page, and by them I mean the triumvirate, the trio of police, Breary and co, but essentially Breary, police, Evans, all on the same page, working it up in order to do what Dr. Philip Hammond is so surprised that Evans is able to do, the statistical miracle. I'm going to read that again. It also highlights what a statistical miracle it was that when prosecution expert Dr. Evans screened the notes blind, all his suspicious cases turned out to involve Lucy Letby. Well, but did they? I'm not trying to knock down this, because he's done a brilliant series of articles, Dr. Hammond, but I need to challenge things in terms of, is it true? Are these assumptions true? All his suspicious cases turned out to involve Letby. Well, yes, eventually. We don't know what kind of horse trading there was between him, Breary, and the police as a process. Furthermore, or moreover, we've got these at least 25 other cases he finds that never end up on any indictment or any charge or even being discussed. We don't even know which babies they're about. We don't know what time period they relate to, and this is how long ago now? Since the beginning of the investigation. It's getting on for 7-8 years. Yeah, 7 years. Getting on for 7 years, coming up to. So what? So how do we know that? How do we know? How do we know that those 25 cases? And I'm assuming they probably did. But then, if they did, why were they just negated by the police or not followed up, or what was up with them? And the perennial point I keep making about them is, if he can get it wrong 25 times in a row after apparently getting it perfectly right, how credible is that? It's utterly nonsensical, isn't it? This is the main person that you're basing your whole investigation on, apparently, and you're going to take his choices, his 17 choices. Well, he makes 15. This is what he tells us. Evans tells us he makes 15 choices out of 33, presumably sets of notes, because he keeps talking about cases. Again, it's about the terminology. 15. What brings it up to 17? And it's odd, isn't it? It's bothering me, these numbers keep repeating. I'm not talking about some abstruse numerology here. I'm just talking about the fact that Dr. Horden is asked to look into 17 babies, i.e., if you're going to use the term this way, 17 cases. And then you end up with 17 cases on the indictment, but they're a different subset, but it's the same number. Coincidence? Or had they just chosen, when Breary had asked, and it probably was Breary, his spearheading it, asked, this is before Evans got involved, asked Horden to look at 17 cases. He wasn't choosing random cases. And that's why I'm challenging what Philip Hammond is asserting here, that we don't know whether those other 8 cases that are not on the indictment but are in Dr. Horden's report, we don't know whether Lucy Letby's on duty for those or not. We don't know. That hasn't been made clear. And if it has been made clear, Dr. Phil Hammond is not making that explicit, other than it just seems like he's assuming it. It might be the case, but it seems like he's assuming it. This bit is really bothering me. So Horden did it eyes open. So what's the difference between doing it eyes open and blind? I don't understand what that means. What does that mean? I don't know what that means in this article. He's saying that prosecution experts screened the notes blind. What does that mean then? That he didn't know the name Lucy Letby? Oh, I don't believe that. But blind in what sense? I don't understand what that means. They've been pre-chosen by Breary. They've all been pre-chosen by Breary, and he's suspicious. His subset that he chooses, indeed, they all involve Lucy Letby. So we hear. We don't know really what happened there. It could have taken some back and forth, and it resolves down to the 15 that they're going to go with. And then they find the 2 extra to make 17, which are these so-called smoking gun cases. The following year, the so-called insulin cases. We've got no idea whether the reality of what happened there, in order to work up which cases they're going to go with, which they're going to drop, how the police can drop 25 subsequent cases whenever they were made, 2018 or 2023. We don't know. That's the level of disparity we've got here in the discussion about this. But the New Yorker says Evans found 25 further cases on top of his original 15 in 2018, but the police never did anything with them. And then Philip Hammond says in his interactions with Evans that Evans told him, Philip Hammond, that he just found them in 2023, very recently. So God knows, we just don't know. We're assuming, and this is back to the thing I was saying in the video I just did earlier about there's so much unreality here. We just don't know what literally happened there for it to end up. We don't know the process. We've got the bare skeleton of it, and we can read into this, that, and the other. We don't know exactly how they interacted and how they all got onto the same page. In what way is Dr. Horden doing it eyes open in a way that Dr. Evans is doing it blind? Or in what is the difference that Dr. Horden is doing it? When Dr. Horden is asked to do it in October 2016, she's not being told that they're suspecting Lucy Letby. I presume I've not heard this anywhere. She's not being told that they're suspecting Lucy Letby of being a murderer. So what's the eyes open bit then? What does that mean, the eyes open bit? In what capacity what are her eyes open to? This is being asserted by Dr. Philip Hammond here. What are her eyes open to? She's just meant to be looking at it forensically, as it were, medically and forensically, to see what the standard of care was and what the conditions were, and how would you explain these crashes, selectively chosen crashes, of course, by Brewery, and the deaths. So in what extra way was her eyes open, and what were they open to? I just don't understand this paragraph at all. And in what sense was Dr. Evans blind? What was his screening of the notes blind, and in what way was it blind? I don't understand it. I'd have to think about that a lot. Well, I'm never going to get there, because we just don't have no idea. We've got no idea the degree to which Evans was fed information via the police but I think and by directly from Brewery and Co. They're all on the same page. They might as well always be in the same room at the same time. But they're never going to find that. They're never going to get that out. They're never going to admit it. They're working something up. They're constructing something as a joint effort. It's a joint effort between them all. We're being told, this is what I believe, absolutely believe this, we're being told an absolute load of pony here about them all. He's doing it blind, and he's never heard of Lucy Letby, but then he does, this is Evans, and he does slip, oh yeah, well I knew they had somebody that had been moved off the ward. They know who they're all going for. Every element of the three, the police, I've been saying this for 15 months now. The police, Evans and the consultants, they're all on the same page all the time from the beginning. And this is why, and this might not strike anyone as that important. It struck when I realised it at the time. I find it important to me as a huge red flag, is that when Evans, and indeed the police, when they're relating those times back in their interviews of 2023 and in the Hummingbird video, there is no recollected sense of tension about thinking, well, if there is a murderer about, where might they be now? Where could they be? Could they have been a nurse that just comes in and just a bank nurse that's working somewhere else now, or even a locum or whoever? We don't know who it is, do we? We're not supposed to know who it is. John Sweeney's talking about that in his latest video. You know, the idea, the nonsense, the totally incredible nonsense that Hughes talks about, that it's all about pretending to as he is. He's literally giving it away here. He's saying, you know, we've got to give the impression as though we're looking at anything and anyone, but he doesn't manage it because he can't cover it skillfully enough. He's literally telling you that it's all a facade. He's got to do the facade of it, not the reality of it, not really consider that it could be anyone or anything meaning not a crime, other causes, infection, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, substandard care, negligent care, dangerously negligent care, a unit not fit for purpose, a dangerous unit, as Dr. Alison Timmis said, an unsafe unit. That was the word she used, unsafe, in which children were going to die, which she wrote that in December 2015 to the CEO, Tony Chambers. I just don't understand this distinction between Evans and Horden and what it actually means. It kind of looks okay on paper, but I'm digging into this and I don't understand what it means, and I'm not sure that Dr. Phil Hammond knows what he means by it, because it's not explicit. In what way is it blind? In what way is it eyes open? In what way is Horden 17? You know, I take huge task with the idea that you're doing it blind, Evans. But I don't understand the distinction between what Horden was doing and what Evans was doing. I don't get it. Maybe is he saying that the blind aspect of it, is he saying that's because he was sent 33 cases and he's whittled them down to 15 apparently? But I think there's this, what I keep calling it, horse trading, of which back and forth between the police and the consultants say, well, okay, well, we'll leave that one, or that doesn't, we won't have that one. We'll just get we'll get the top 15, and oh, you made a mistake there, Dewey. She's not on duty there. We'll scrub that one. And when you come up with a 25, oh no, they're too weak. We'll scrub all 25 of those. But we've got a solid. We're looking for a solid core here, Dewey, where we're all on one page with the consultants, the police, and Dewey Evans, to get the core that ends up being the indictment, and then you get the so-called smoking gun cases a year later. They're developing a core to it. In what way is Horden's approach eyes open? I don't know what her eyes are open to. She's being tasked. She is being tasked, so with an advisory medical report to explain why these deaths happened medically, forensically, essentially, isn't it? Medically, scientifically, medically, explain why the crashes and the deaths happened of 17 babies. I could go over this for hours, and I just don't. It's not. I'm not trying to worry this into some kind of clarity, because it's just, I don't think we can get the clarity, because we don't know the truth of the reality of what happened between Evans, the police, and the consultants. We don't know it. We know the consultants. That's a question. This 22-page report about that Breary creates, and he creates it subsequent to Jane Horden's report. What relevance does that bear to Jane Horden's report? Has he just gone off on his own again and said, well, it doesn't matter what Jane Horden said. These are the ones we're worried about, irrespective of what Jane Horden said. And that's part of that 22-page report, which I believe gets passed over to Dewey Evans. Anyway, I can't, I've got to leave it there, I think. But when Horden did it, eyes open, 8 of them didn't. Well, see, I know this might, I'm sorry if it's boring, but I just got to go where I go. It's not boring to me. I'm not saying it. 8 of them didn't, he says. In other words, 8 of them didn't involve Lucy Letby. But what does that mean, not involve her? He doesn't, does he know, does Dr. Philip Hammond know that she wasn't on duty those times? Didn't involve her. Well, it just might, she might have been involved, but it's not a question about her involvement. That's the point. Her involvement is immaterial, because if i.e. her being there, or in the next room, or on duty, or just coming on duty, or just leaving, it's immaterial because for Jane Horden's report, because she's finding the specific reasons for the crash and the reasons and seeing the suboptimal care and documenting it, and then Joe McPartland's doing further work on that. So her involvement, it's not material. It's not material whether she's involved, i.e., there or not there, because the point of those, I'm lost with that. I'm very confused, because I think there are a whole raft of assumptions being made here, and there are comparators that just don't make sense, and there are oppositional statements, blind and eyes open, that I can't grasp what it means. I'll have to leave it there, otherwise I don't know what I'll do. Anyway, sorry if it's a bit long, this, but I thought I was going to finish the whole thing. There's 3 more sections. There's 14 months later, then CCR application. The last one is ask the other expert. I'll try and do that all in one go. I should be able to. I'm sorry if that was a bit of a drag, but language is so important, because language is meant to correlate or relate to truth, unless you're deliberately lying, of course. But there's further levels of potential mystification here in certain assertions for which we don't actually know the truth. And we don't simply know. We absolutely do not know the process that was undergone. We know what they say happened, but you can bet your bottom dollar that's not what happened. It's not as simple as that. But as I say, they were working up a core of cases that they could all get on the same page about, and excluding ones that, even potentially up to 25 or even 50 other ones that Evans chose, and just putting them by the wayside because they just didn't want to work with them. And that's the level of, it's not caprice, but that's the level of design that's at work here. That's how much it's designed and constructed. I've got to leave it there. I haven't got anything to drink. I could do with a brandy. Anyway, take care. Bye.